Hello, annyeonghaseyo, goeiedag. My name is Sangho, I'm the CEO of Cryptopia and I welcome you to Cryptopia Cast. Here we discover the latest trends in crypto space and the people behind them. By the way, if you do not know Cryptopia, we are an upcoming blockchain game that stands out by design choices. We are free to earn, so no need for an NFT or an investment. We are 100% decentralized and most of all, fun to play. Are you ready to dive into the wonderful world of crypto, NFTs and games? Then please join me. In this episode, we engage in a fascinating conversation with Matt, the guild manager of Big Time, a free-to-play multiplayer action RPG that stands as one of the most prominent Web3 games in existence today. We delve into Matt's responsibilities within Big Time and explore the essential components required for crafting a successful Web3 game. This podcast promises an intriguing discussion offering valuable insights that will enrich your understanding. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode as we embark on a captivating journey. Okay, welcome back. So here we are with Matt Thwaites. So I can call you Matt, right?
Yes, please.
All right, Matt. So the first question we always start our podcast with is, who is Matt?
I'm the guild manager for Big Time Studios.
All right, cool. Yeah. Big Time, well, we all know this game. If you're a bit into gaming or blockchain gaming, then one way or another you will stumble upon Big Time because it's a very famous game. Can you give us a short overview of Big Time and in specifics the Big Time economy?
Absolutely. I think to fundamentally understand about Big Time, kind of what our identity is that we're just a video game. And it's like a very much a fun first focused video game. It's a mixture between World of Warcraft and Diablo. I would say it's a multiplayer RPG game. You roam this overworld, and then there are these purple gates that appear randomly throughout the world, and you can drop into them and form these parties with up to 5 other people, and then go through these quests and complete missions and beat bosses and enemies that are inside of those dungeons. Cosmetic skins drop as NFTs inside of the game as well. Okay. So that's the kind of core loop upon which everything else is built. The economy part of it is in 2 parts. When you find those cosmetic skins right now, it's a fairly transactional version of our economy. You can find those things, you can put them directly onto our marketplace, you can buy, sell, trade them, whatever it is that you want to do with them. In the future, you're actually going to be able to craft and make your own. And a kind of high level overview is that we have our land, it's called space. And inside of that, you can engage these things called time wardens, armories, and forges. And to do that, or with those items, you can then collect the in-game token, or you can make your own, for example, weapons or armor and stuff like that. Cool. That's how users make stuff. And then the exact process of that is what we've spent months and months trying to refine and make sure we get it right.
Yeah. So you talk about cosmetics. So does it mean that it is really only cosmetic items, or are NFTs also like utility, like better stats and better armor, stuff like that?
Just cosmetic. And it's a hot take, I think, because in most games they would probably opt for an NFT, 1 being a requirement to get into the game, or 2, it gives you some sort of competitive advantage. And pretty strongly, we went in a different direction from that. So Big Time is a free-to-play game. It's always going to be like that. And then the cosmetics are NFTs. The land is, and the utility NFTs allow you to produce more of that stuff. But we didn't want it to become a pay-to-win game. We thought that was something that would ostracize or be unpalatable to a lot of Web2 gamers who have some pretty strong feelings about that. And overwhelmingly, we thought the biggest problem, I think, with Web3 gaming is user acquisition. So transitioning Web2 gamers into Web3 is super, super important for us. We thought a free-to-play, not pay-to-win game was going to help with that.
Yeah. Well, we fully agree, of course, with you, because Cryptopia is in the same boat, right? And I find it sometimes very difficult to believe that there are Web3 games trying to convince gamers, and whether they are Web2 or Web3 doesn't even matter, But you know, if you want to try out a new game, that you have to buy something first in order to just look around, right? I think it's ridiculous, and I think you cannot onboard a lot of people if you gate it like that. So I understand where you come from. Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you describe the problem very simply. And imagine you take somebody who has never played your game before, and maybe they occasionally hear the news and they think that there's something suspicious out there with blockchain, or perhaps they don't have the greatest amount of trust for it.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we need to go get a wallet. Let me explain to you how MetaMask works. Let me explain to you why you need to remember these 12 random words and don't lose them ever. Then I need you to just go ahead and fire off your credit card or bank information and go buy some cryptocurrency you also don't understand.
Yeah.
And after about 3 hours and a lot of confusion later, you can then start playing this game that you may not like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And this is the best outcome even, because chances are that you have to wrap your crypto into another chain and then you lose it somewhere. It's in your account, but you cannot find it. I've been there. When I first needed to transfer to Binance chain, I believe, I don't even know the exact details, but I could not access it anymore. I knew I had it somewhere, but it was wrapped, or it took some time before it was visible again. So I was really confused. And I'm in crypto. So can you imagine if you've never done anything with crypto before? Yeah, you're not going to make it. You drop out. I'm certain of that.
Absolutely. And so like when we said that we were going to go for kind of a fun first focus game in 2020 or even in 2021, I think that was kind of counterculture at the time. Like there were some play to earn games that were absolutely exploding, and you had the advent of these guilds that were very successful. And it was like, well, why don't you just make another one of those? Like those are working pretty good. And we thought just kind of long term, it would be better. And even the way that we kind of gated our game and connected, like all you need to do to register is just connect a Google account. It was always built with the idea in mind. It's like, make it as easy as possible to use this, to use crypto. And if anything, if you get people involved and they have a positive experience inside of Big Time, they're going to probably be more likely to engage in things like what other parts of blockchain in other gaming areas or outside of gaming. I think we're helping out with that. It's still a slow process, but I think we're helping out with that.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's more like I'm well, curious what you think. If you are not giving players a chance for free to get to know your game, you know, to get acquainted with it, or to look around and see if it's something for them or not. To me, it sounds more like that maybe you don't have a very good game or a very good concept because you are afraid and you want to charge people up front, and you don't trust your own product. Because if you do, you can say everyone can have a look, try it out, and we know not the whole world is going to play this game because we don't want to onboard all the gamers in the world. And I guess Big Time is also not aiming for all the players in the world, because you realize that you have different genres, different tastes, different preferences. But if you build something great, people will stick, right? So a lot of people will stick around. So I think it's more, sometimes like a trust thing. People don't trust their game and they want to charge up front, and then they at least have some money, and then they see where it's headed, right?
Yeah, I remember I started doing kind of a lot more social media engagement stuff about 8 months ago. And I was talking to a lot of games, and I looked at some of my notes from back then. And I was like, I don't really recognize any of the names of these games anymore. And I realized they're kind of not around. Why? Because when there was this bull market, everybody and anybody was like, I got a game coming. Here's a token. The game is coming. Just wait. And then it just never came. And that's tough. And it's kind of one of the reasons why we were a bit conservative with marketing and hyping Big Time, is we want to just show like, hey, we have a game. People are already playing it. It's not just like kind of extensively hyped or theatrical trailers. We kind of released the game in an alpha, and we're like, here it is. It's already something for people to look at, to engage in, and we keep adding content to it. And it's still very much in alpha. But when I think about like what was kind of fashionable over the last couple of years, it was make a trailer if you can, Definitely get some good artists, and then do a token raise. We didn't do that. We didn't even. The token is only going to be available through in-game play. We're still a couple months away from that, but I think that kind of does a lot for building trust with the community. It's like, okay, they're saying they're building something and they're actually taking this feedback. They're going to do it. Exactly. It may take a little bit longer, but it's going to happen. And I think that long term, it's a trust bank we can rely on.
Yeah, I fully agree, and it shows you have your priorities right. Build first, listen to the feedback, co-create in a sense, because you want something that they want to play, right? So you have to continuously check with them: is this what you want, or we have these ideas of this game mechanic, and maybe they say this is not going to work. Please change it, and then you have to decide for yourself. And that's the hard part, I think, as a game developer. When are you stubborn and when are you going to listen? Because it's of course a balance. It is ultimately at the end of the day your game, right? Or Big Time is the owner of the game, so you have the right to be a bit stubborn. Let's put it that way. But of course you cannot be deaf to the community. So I think it's a delicate balance, to do it together. Of course you want to do it together, but sometimes, well, maybe let's rephrase it. Do you recognize this, that the community wants to go in a certain direction, but you as a game developer do not want to do it?
Yeah. Yes and no. And let me it's a short response to, I think, a very practical problem. So we build a game and we have to go in kind of a certain direction with it, right? We already said it's just on PC for right now. That's gonna ostracize a fair number of gamers out there who perhaps only have mobile or console. They're like, okay, well, you're already not going to get everybody, similar to what we mentioned before. We're also building a certain type of genre. It's an MMO. It's a little bit slower than something like a first-person shooter. Some people really love first-person shooters. That's the reason why Fortnite is back-to-back kind of biggest game in the world, because they like it. And, we thought that we could build a better MMO style game, and it went better with blockchain. It's like, okay, well, that's going to be a little tough with certain people. The other thing is as we release content, we're different than a AAA studio. We're different than something like Epic and Rockstar, where they generally have a lead of 5 or 6 years to make a game. Like Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption took 5 years each to make, and about $300 million. We're closer to an indie studio. And so when we release things, we do things kind of like step by step. When we release content updates, whereas those guys, they normally release everything and it's already finalized and done. So our community gets a say earlier, but everybody kind of has their own preferences, and our community is a lot bigger than our team. And so if they're like, hey, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, most of the time those ideas are fantastic, but we only have 48 developers and artists. So we can't keep up with everything that people want to see inside the game. So we have to kind of choose the most important things. But what we do try and do is engage a ton. Every couple of weeks, we'll do some sort of AMA or something like that to explain why we went in a certain direction with an update, or why we thought this would work instead of this, or why we're doing this now and perhaps something else later. And that's, again, that kind of trust that we're trying to build. So if anything, they may not like the answer, but I think they can feel confident that we answered their questions. But even over the last 6 months, when I look at the content that's come out, it's been pretty extensive.
Good. Yeah, and I hear you. I mean, you are really good in the communication, right? And I think that's an important one. Even if you cannot get what you want as a player or as a community, it all depends on how you communicate it and how transparent you are. Can they understand the decision you make? And if you explain it as you explain it now, then it's a lot easier to accept, of course, that some things are not going to be in the way you want it as a player or as a certain segment of the player community. I think it's easy to accept if you can understand the reasoning, and you may still disagree, but at least if you take the time and the effort to explain it to me, a player, then I would be like, okay, these guys are very seriously about communication and keeping us on board and trying to be transparent and do it together. So I understand that it generates trust. Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Yeah.
Hey, about your role within Big Time, because you have a very specific role, right?
Sure do. Yeah. Guild manager.
Yes, exactly. That sounds really cool. And I guess a lot of people know about guilds, and maybe there are viewers now that are not playing blockchain games and don't know anything about a guild other than that's a group of players doing stuff in a game. So can you explain a bit about what it is, a guild in big time, and what your role is?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a funny anecdote. Maybe it's just funny to me, but my kind of title of like Matt the Guild Guy really came about because we at the time we had like 6 people named Matt at like a 50-person company, and our emails were all just flying at each other, and on Discord there was a ton of confusion. So I just started referring to myself as Matt the Guild Guy, and we've got Matt the Tech Guy, so it kind of stuck. And I think that nickname came first, and then the title Matt the Guild Manager came second.
Oh, great!
People were like, he's just doing the guild stuff. But broadly speaking, I would say that the guild manager role really involves moving in groups of players into big time and then keeping them involved in big time. It's kind of a 2-part of acquisition and continued engagement. In my mind, guilds are something that existed prior to Axie Infinity, where they were kind of a way to overcome a financial barrier to entry into the game. Guilds, the model of guilds I have in my mind are people playing World of Warcraft together, and they have a team, horde or alliance, and they go on raids, and they have like a Discord in their community, and it's just like a preset group of like online friends that you can play with. That's what I really like about guilds. Mm-hmm. There are people who play the game, and big time really shines best when you have other people to play it with. It's pretty challenging as a solo experience, but when you have other people to play with, it's a lot of fun. It's when half the reason you're going to play a game, I believe, is for the game. The other half is for the memories you're going to make with other people. Yeah. And so guilds exist in many other types of games, Web 2, Web 3. I like to go talk with them, talk about big time, try and get them to try it out. And then for the guilds that are currently involved, I try and answer their questions, be just a general point of contact for them, and then try and give them other ways to get involved in big time. So for example, right now, like, hey, there's ways that big time can sponsor tournaments. This is something I think users would like. And here's some general ideas they think for how tournaments could work. So really just being a point of contact for those guilds is my main job.
All right. And do you also have like more or questions from guilds about like scholarships and stuff like that? Because if you took guilds in Web3, and you already named Axie, right? So for the listeners or viewers that don't know about this, the guilds originated with Axie Infinity because the assets you needed to have to play, so the little animals, the Axies, were at some point too expensive. So the people who could afford it then decided to lend them out to other players, and they could play with them, and they shared the profit or the revenue. So that's the scholarship relation, and that grew a bit bigger than Axie Infinity. And we also get a lot of questions for our game. Do you have scholarships? Do you have scholarships? Do you have scholarships? So there is a sort of demand from a specific player group or segment that is really interested in becoming a scholar. And that means that they somehow anticipate in a game that they cannot afford to buy the asset you need in order to play. And they look for other players that can have an asset and allow you to play with that asset. So that's a bit the scholarship relationship. For you, Matt, do you get questions about that? Because you already said you have cosmetics. So the NFT, there's no NFT necessary to play, right? But you also mentioned you have land. So do you have something with guilds and scholars talking to you?
Absolutely. It's a lexicon difference. It's like a different language when you talk to somebody who perhaps had a guild that they founded or operated in during the kind of heyday of Axie, or if it's another type of guild that's playing Valorant together. It's just a different way of kind of talking, and a lot of times kind of different goals. There's a very there's a remnant of I call like Axie goggles of how guilds and players and scholars should work, where when people look at a game, they're like, well, my baseline understanding of this relationship is Axie Infinity, and if it's not like that, then it's probably not good. And they're like, I want revenue, I want a split, like I should be able to control the entry for these players for a variety of reasons. That just doesn't work in big time, and it's probably not going to work. That's the way we kind of built the game. So for me, the guild part is like, if you have players that can work together, you can find more cosmetics, you can find more NFTs, you can find more of the ingredients. There are increasing returns to people working cooperatively together. So if you're purely from a guild perspective, like I want to find NFTs and flip them, you're going to still want a big community. You're going to really want that. You're going to want to play together, and you're going to want to have this identity because there's so many more returns to that. So I think the general concept of a guild, which is, sometimes extractive in nature, they can still do that in big time. It just needs to look different. It needs to be different to be successful in big time. Okay. For Web2 guilds, I'm like, you just play the game. We'll give you access to the game and go in there, and it's kind of a more straightforward experience, and play together, get on the same server, and talk a whole bunch of smack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And get some brilliant loot together and talk about that again, right? So that's really it. Okay, cool. And with respect to the land, are you allowed to provide more details on that? How is it gonna work with the land? Because it's clearly different from the cosmetic NFTs.
Yeah. One of the exciting things that happened last week was you could actually start using your land inside of the game. It's kind of maybe 10% of the functionality that you're going to be able to see or do with it in the next 6 months or so, but you can finally get in there and access it. Wow. So aesthetically in your mind, our land, which again we call space, is like a room in a castle. And there's different themes or layouts, got almost like a 1900s theme to it. We've got a futuristic setting to it. There's like a cowboy and dinosaurs one. But aesthetically, think of it like that. And then there's 3 different sizes and they're different types of rarities. In this room in the house, you can imagine you put these utility NFTs to the outside of it. You connect them to the exits. So you have 3 types of things called time wardens, forges, and armories. The time wardens essentially start a countdown timer for you, where if you play for a certain number of days or weeks, when you play the game, you can collect the in-game token. That's the only way to do it, is you have to have that utility NFT, but that kind of gates the access of finding the token to the ability to have that utility NFT, which helps us control the supply and the inflation of it. And then the forges and armories are a way to craft cosmetics or armory and weapons. And so there's almost like ingredients that you have to put into it. So for example, you collect the token, some base layer NFTs, put it inside of the forge, cook it up for 7 days, and then out pops a more rare version of it. Okay. And so that's broadly speaking how it goes. And these are kind of built over a 90-day season where we're like, hey, there's going to be a one-of-one NFT, and whoever kind of makes it first it's a race to make that one-of-one. And we expect kind of guilds and teams to compete in that to be the person who makes that one-of-one first.
Yeah. All right, cool. And like the ingredients for the forge, are they collectible in the game for everyone, or do you also need to have a specific, or is that utility also gated?
There are two parts. So sometimes the utility NFTs will drop sparingly inside the game. There's going to be far more players in there than there are these utility NFTs.
Yeah, makes sense.
You can find all the ingredients from in-game play. They just drop pretty sparingly. The main limitation of these things called time shards. Time shards are we will sell them on our marketplace through USDC. That imposes almost a soft floor upon the value of the token. And then you can either buy them that way or find them from in-game play. You put them into your time warden. That's how you start the time warden on the countdown timer to go out there, find the token, find these other NFTs, and then put them inside of it. But it would be very challenging for a player who's just kind of casually playing the game to find enough of those time shards to then generate enough tokens to then generate an NFT.
Yeah.
So it's basically the forging process. Although it does not give you kind of a competitive advantage in the game, that's more kind of financially got a barrier in front of it. But we think that does a lot to kind of protect the prices of things or the inflationary aspects of certain parts of the economy.
Makes sense. Yeah. Great, cool. So the land is now, or the rooms are now introduced, you say, for the first
Yeah.
time? Okay, cool. And you have like themes like cowboys and dinosaurs, and how is that working?
The general lore of Big Time is that it's set in the future and this kind of end of humanity, and it's called Time's End. Time is collapsing. It's kind of forced multiple time periods and timelines together in one place. And so
Okay.
we have kind of one time period right now, but you're going to be able to like go into other different time periods. From a game development standpoint, a time travel perspective is kind of appealing because you can really vary the gameplay a ton, and it all stays within the same lore. So that's pretty cool. As we release kind of more themes, it'll go hand in hand with the advent of more worlds that we release. But the multiple themes that you can kind of do within space just allows for greater customizability.
Yeah. Great. Sounds really cool. So, just wondering, how long are you in the Web3 space? Since when are you there?
I am 1 day short of 11 months.
1 day short of 11 months. Okay. And were you in crypto before that period?
I was neither in crypto nor tech nor gaming.
No.
It was a huge jump. In hindsight, the guy who hired me, we talk about it all the time. I was like, man, you made a terrible decision. This is a bad hire. It's like negative experience. And but no, it was a pretty big transition for me. Yeah.
Okay. And what is your background then?
I was actually in the Army before this, and then currently I'm a grad student at business school.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, that's a big jump then, man.
Yeah, it's good. It was a transition, and then I'm still ostensibly kind of a full-time student, so I tend to work either earlier in the morning or in the evenings for Big Time. It's been a good challenge. My hours are normally pretty wild, but it's been good. I feel like that's the Web3 way. You always have to kind of work these uncomfortable hours.
Yeah, that's true, especially with time zones and stuff like that. So yeah, wow. But it's also interesting because you have a really fresh take and a fresh view on what happens, and if you're somewhere for a longer period, then you have some blind sides and blind spots you can't see anymore. And if you're relatively new, then you probably have also fresh views or fresh ideas. So related to that, if you look at it 11 months ago and where we are now, and as you already mentioned briefly, you saw some projects when you did some research and they are gone. So obviously something changed drastically. So what do you think about the future for Web3 gaming? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the overall trend is it's moving towards better game content and easier access of crypto. I think people try to move or set Web3 kind of in the future and then wait for Web2 users to kind of come meet them. I think there's a bigger movement towards moving Web2 to be a little bit smaller gap or a smaller jump for those kind of traditional people. And there's a variety of reasons for it. We've talked about the kind of complexity of being able to get into a game here previously, and it was too high. And I don't think anybody's going to really do that, especially given the kind of bear market and the widespread pretty negative news that's happened with crypto and blockchain. People are kind of less trustful, and especially now that there's not these potentially massive returns coming out of it, they're like, why would I risk all that for something I may not like? And it's not like I'm making tons of money over this. So you got to move back for it. And you've seen, I think, a lot of games move towards creative ways of having a lighter touch on blockchain, making it a little bit easier for a totally new or uneducated person to get involved with it. And then this is the general trend. It's like an arms race. It's just going to keep getting better over time for the gameplay. You have games like Call of Duty and Diablo Immortal that are being fantastically successful in the middle of a straight up recession. Why? Because people still play games. They're still a thing. And so if you don't have a good game that can kind of compete or look like those other things, then you're not going to see those same kind of numbers that these games are producing.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. Yeah, especially when in this environment with the bear market, but also the real economy. Well, the United States not really different from Europe, I guess. So we all know it's not really how do you say it in Dutch, rooskleurig, bright. There's not really a bright future, right? For everyone, at least, not for everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you need to decide on, whether to save your last your dollar or your euro, maybe for your washing machine breaks in the future or stuff like that, or whether to put it into a game, buy an NFT in order to play a game, the choice is easy, right?
Yeah.
But if it's not in that same pocket of consideration, but gaming is outside of investing or making sure you can pay for something in the future, right? Gaming is in another sort of pocket, also mentally, because gaming is like leisure or spending time with friends. So if you are more focusing on that one instead of on the financial aspects or the finance or the investment aspect of Web3 gaming, then of course it's not competing with that and it's easier. So I think that's also playing a vital role. And I think that people indeed also learn not to jump into any project with an NFT anymore, but really be careful and do some actual research. Like, what is it? Is it a game? Okay, what's the game about? How are the NFTs? Do I need an NFT? What can I win? But is the actual gameplay, right? And I think that's a really good thing. Absolutely a good thing.
I wholeheartedly agree. Like, can you imagine like telling somebody it's like, hey, this is a Web3 game. It's not quite done yet, but you need a $3,000 NFT to start playing. But trust me, it's gonna be good. And it'd be like, well,
yeah.
Cool. Just, you sure you don't have a game yet? But there are still some projects doing that. And I'm like, it blows my mind.
Me too. Yeah.
I remember about 2 recessions ago, for the one that was in in 2008, I was listening to and I'm a small business owner talk about with an economist about what people do in recessions, and broadly it was like they don't make huge purchases. They don't like go out on expensive vacations in recessions, but people tend to still buy small things like smaller pleasures, like go to an ice cream parlor more a little bit. And they were like, those things actually tend to do pretty well in recessions because people still want to enjoy themselves. They just have to do it on a budget. And as I kind of look at these other games that are coming out and still being successful, or just the general growth of Web2 games, it's still going up at a pretty freaking high rate. And that's where I'm just kind of like, you can still do this. You probably can't gate it with a multi-$1,000 NFT, but like people still want to play games. That's still a reason why 3 billion people out there still play video games in some active way. So
absolutely,
it's still a good path forward. It's going to look different. We have to adjust, but that's okay. It's Web3. It pretty much just generates itself every 12 months anyways, but
exactly.
A long path forwards.
Yeah, and I think if we even also, because we only talk about the financial benefits, but of course below that, or the first one is of course the ownership, so your time you spend in a game and the rewards you earn by investing your time are yours, right? And whether it's worth money or whatever, or some currency, just leave it at there. It's yours. You can give it away to some other player. You can get it out of the game. You can send it to another wallet. That buy and in itself is of course. Why aren't we talking about that even more? Because that is really, really, really awesome. If you play like World of Warcraft, or I played Guild Wars, but also World of Warcraft, and I spent many hours. But yeah, once they say I'm sorry, this item is not worth any more, or we quit, or I want to quit, there's nothing I can do with it. I can give it away to my guild or my clan, but that's it, right? And I can't give it to some other character or my nephew and say you can play with it. Well, I can, but probably it's against the terms of service somewhere hidden, because you cannot give your user access to another player, right? But now you can easily strip your character and give away everything, to your nephew, to your uncle, to your aunt. If they want to play, you can help them kickstart playing. It's yours. You can decide what to do with it. So I think that in itself is incredible. It's for the first time in history, the gamers are really owning in-game items, and that is remarkable, right? So I think you can sway Web2 gamers coming to blockchain games, but of course there is a prerequisite, and I hope it will be a hygiene factor very soon. You have to have a game that is fun. You have to have a game with good gaming loops, and as long as you have that, people will come. I'm absolutely convinced.
Yeah. Now I would argue that the biggest pain point that your kind of, I would say, competitive Web2 gamer has is they don't own their stuff. Like, you play Fortnite or something like that. Like you just mentioned, like you'd spend like hundreds or thousands of dollars in a game that you really enjoy, and then what can you do with this stuff afterwards? Like if you buy a skin, you generally buy it, but like it almost kind of like slows down your ability to buy a more rare one later on. Almost like the worst thing you can do is I'm going to buy a $10 skin, and then save up, buy a $100 one, so I can save up and buy a $1,000 one or whatever it may be. But you can't like resell or get anything back from that that $20, $100 one. But at least in Web3, it's like pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna move it along so I can
absolutely or you at least it's upgradable in that sense, right? So and my kids also, they play Fortnite and on and off, right? And then there's a new skin, and then can I have some money or pocket money? They have pocket money, of course, but they can't do online transactions themselves, right? Because it's on my accounts as a parent, so they have to ask me to do the purchase, and then I get money back from them. And every now and then they want to have a pass because there's a certain skin. So it's yes, I understand it completely, but it's all paying again and again and again. But they can't do anything with it. It's like you can only wear one at a time, and maybe it's nice to have 10, but if you have 20. At some point, maybe you want to clean up and give it away or sell it or upgrade it, so and that's not possible. So
That's so funny, the Fortnite comparison, because like I didn't realize it until I kind of brought it up with somebody as like a parent. It's like when you talk to them, you're like, well, at least in big time you can kind of sell your cosmetic skins. Like in Fortnite, you can't do that. And like every time, like the parents like, yeah, I remember I've like sunk a lot of money into
exactly.
with this exact dialogue, and I was like, oh yeah, this really resonates. Like
absolutely and it's great. But what I like about it is it's only cosmetic as well, right? So there's no advantage, it's not pay to win. And I think that kids feel that maybe they cannot even explain it in their words, but they know it's just fair, right? And if it would be the other way around, they would know it's not fair, because people with money can buy a better gun or better bullets or what have you. So they know it's an even level playing field. So only about, this one looks funny and I don't look funny. I also want to look funny, so I want to spend money. And that's great, right? I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. It's tough to balance. Like if you, at some point, games do need to make revenue. They need to,
of course,
they got to do it. How do you do it in a way that doesn't kind of ostracize the long-term part of it? And the long-term part of like certain communities. Like if I could just like swipe a credit card and become the greatest player in the game ever, that's going to tick off some people. But it's got to happen in some way. And that's, if you can do it in a way, I think that kind of gives back to the players as well. A lot of those games I think are going to be kind of successful.
Yes. Well said. Already the last question due to the time, and I have to choose because I have many more questions. But I'm gonna circle back to your game, because I'm very happy that you wanted to be here. So I also want to give you time to talk about. Is there something you want to say instead of me asking a question? Is there some topic you want to talk about?
That's a great question. I think kind of like, oh man.
Well, we can cut it. No worries.
No. I normally, I'm trying to think. Like, I would say one of the defining characteristics of Web3 games that kind of developed was community engagement. Like, how do you engage with your community in kind of like a positive way? And I've seen some kind of creative ideas on this, some different ideas. Some are good, some are bad. But I think talking about community engagement in Web3 games, I think is kind of a persistently interesting topic to me. And I enjoy like even hearing how you guys do it. I know how we do it and where I think we're going to keep doing it in the future, but it's such an important part of a Web3 game's identity, like community management, engagement, whatever you want to call it. But it's something that a Web2 game really doesn't do. They don't like build games hand in hand kind of with their actual user base. They don't reach out probably as kind of directly into the Discord channels or the AMAs with key players or guilds. But that is very much a part of any Web3 game's identity. So I find that topic to be pretty kind of interesting. If we've got some closing minutes here.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's also, well, at least for a starting game, it's the way to go. Unless you have very deep pockets and you can throw millions into marketing and create ads and be everywhere. But even then, I think we as a project, because we really want to be decentralized and we really want to be owned by the community, it's still no way to go for us. But aside from that, I think it's really important to first of all create what people want to play and give them a say in the development or the direction you go. And second, because it is also partly, it's a weird thing now because of the Web3, people become investors one way or another, right? In our game, you can earn for free, so it's free to earn, but you earn the tokens, and we of course stimulate you to keep adding value to the game. So we stimulate you to reinvest the earnings you have, and while doing that, you become an investor, right? So, and some people don't realize, but so there are stakeholders, and they can also vote. And I really believe that it is important that you give people the opportunity to use that perks or use that right they have in an active way. And if you never talk about it, if you never ask opinions, if you never get them engaged in decision making, well, they never understand it. They don't know it's possible. So I think there is an active role for us to go out and tell to the people, we are really different, and you can come to our project, and if you like it, you can stay, and if you want to stay, you can also participate, and not by buying an asset, but really contributing, and I think that's really important in our project.
Yeah, and each game has to do it differently because they have a kind of a different core loop. One of the things that I think I've spent a lot of time dealing with in the last couple of weeks is kind of Twitter as a platform. Not just because Elon Musk does a great job of keeping it in the forefront of everybody's mind, but like, who's on Twitter? I think Twitter is probably the most Web3 or crypto friendly social media platform that's out there, at least of like the major platforms. But I don't think it's the best place for gamers. When we talk about Web3 gamers, I think they're really kind of more on like Twitch or in these Discord groups somewhat, or perhaps Reddit. And that's where, conversely, I think it's kind of the hardest message to kind of get Web3 in there. I remember I was posting on Reddit about blockchain stuff or NFTs earlier on this year. Man, it was like walking into a building on fire. I was like, why is everybody so angry? Yeah. But long term, I think that's where almost every game needs to go. They need to be able to speak that language and appeal to those types of people. So it's hard to get there. You almost have to kind of get off of Twitter to go find where we all know that kind of deep reservoir of like players ultimately exists. But that's where everybody's really struggling, I think, to get a message that is heard and received positively. So that's a really big thing for me, and kind of a big part of what I do as a guild manager is figure out what are they looking for? Because if you kind of talk about a lot of the ownership stuff or the transaction ability that we just mentioned with skins, I think of most gamers like that. They like that ability, particularly if they don't have to compromise on the game. But as soon as you say the word NFT or crypto, they're going to be like, ugh, I'm done. Screw you. Like, I don't want to hear anymore. And so it's a different way of kind of engaging on it, because you're building something that they like, but they don't like the name of it.
Yeah. That's a difficult one, right? So you can just rename it, of course, and then try to not name it for as long as possible.
Exactly.
That would be the best. But if you just list the advantages, it's a great game, and it's free to play, it's only cosmetics, not pay to win. There's all the things that resonate with them, right? So only the NFT part, that's a difficult one then, right? But some, at some point you have to, of course, talk about it, but hopefully you are then already, at a certain stage that they think, okay, I heard so many good things, maybe I should listen to this guy or keep listening to this guy, right? And I think that's in a nutshell how the adoption will go. I think there will be many people still very allergic to anything with blockchain or anything with NFTs, and right so, right? I mean, it's not ridiculous. I can really understand why they feel this way, and it's our job to come up with, you know, great products, great projects, good explanations, but also fair. How do you say it? Put the money where the mouth is, right? So don't sell them promises, but, you know, deliver on it, build the things we say we're building, and demonstrate that it is possible, and that it has benefits for everyone. And as long as we do that, we will help, you know, people getting a bit less allergic in Reddit and on the other platforms.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. So
For
we have
sure.
a huge responsibility, Matt.
Yeah, we got to figure this thing out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow, great. Matt, I really want to thank you. We're gonna put the website and the socials in the show notes, so people can find you, your project there. I want to thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed it, and I wish you all the best with Big Time and with the community and talking within Reddit.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for having us on. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, and best of luck for you guys as well.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
All right.